Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me, and soon, speaking with all your fans and Romanian readers, because this will get to them. I want to say that I had a lot of fun reading the novel. It took me out of a really big reading slump. So I wanted to ask, what was the most enjoyable part of you writing the novel and creating the McMasters universe? And if there's also an aspect of writing the book that surprised you in a good way.
It was a joy to write the book for me personally. I wrote it during the lockdown of the pandemic, COVID. And as you know, I'm also a playwright. I write for the stage and a recording artist. And when COVID hit, all theater everywhere in the world came to an end. All the productions of all of my plays, my mysteries, my comedy thrillers just ceased, just stopped. And I was fortunate that I had already a contract with Simon & Schuster, my publisher, Avid Reader Press. You said you are an avid reader, and my publishing company is called Avid Reader Press here in the United States. And I was very fortunate that I had this existing demand to write this novel, which I had already sort of pitched to them, explained to them what it would be about, and written a few sample chapters. And I thought, well, thank goodness I can pour my entire life into this novel now. And I was able to create a world that allowed me to escape from COVID. Mm-hmm. It allowed me to escape from all the darkness around the world at that time, and instead go to a place where I thought, oh, I would love to spend my life here. I could be so happy. So I got to invent this unique campus, this university for murder, and I wanted to make it not a dark place, not a sinister place, but I wanted to make it a place you would love to be, and to just to be the exact opposite of all the scary movies that always show the sinister castle or whatever. I wanted this to be the dreamiest, most idyllic campus that you could be on. I purposely made sure that the cuisine of the campus has a secret 3-star rating from the Guide Michelin, and that every meal is memorable, that the accommodations are dreamy, that to take a walk around the campus is just to have the loveliest time. I kind of thought a little bit about something in Romania that I've never seen, but I've read about it and seen a lot of photographs, and that was the Mary Cemetery.
Oh,
yeah. I have always thought that is the most wonderful idea for a cemetery. Just a place where, and by the way, where some of the tombs are marked with funny jokes about the people that are there. And I wanted to be that kind of optimism. I wanted to be just like the best. One dreams of going to a university like the old-fashioned universities with camaraderie and friendship and sports and a retreat from cold reality, and dedicated to a higher purpose and a greater sense of a greater appreciation of scholarly things. In this case, the scholarly thing is murder.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make it any less sincere in its aim. So it was a wonderful experience to create the campus and to create the world and the people within it. You know, when I write a play, one of my favorite moments, anytime I write a play or a musical, is that first page where I, as a writer sitting in a room, get to describe everything you see on the stage. It's your last chance as a writer to kind of have your way with creating what visually will be on that stage. And it's a treat because the letters don't cost anything. So I can build a very elaborate set, and I can describe galleries or secret rooms or sculptures, and it's just such a lovely time. And it's my way of communicating to the person who will ultimately design the set, the scenic designer, what I have in mind for these characters. And sometimes people will see the finished set and they'll say, well, what do you think of it? Was it a surprise? I said, no, it's exactly what I thought it would be. Well, in a novel, you get to describe. One of the nicest compliments I've ever received in a review was when someone said about my novel, great scenery. Great scenery. Well, it's just 26 letters, but somehow the chance to make the reader be able to visualize this world that they're in is such a delight for me. And it's sort of my reward for putting in the time in the novel, is that I get to. It's a little bit like people who have a hobby of model trains, miniature trains, and they will build a layout, and they will build a city or a village or mountains. And so they'll say, well, I'll have some Carpathian mountains and the Black Sea over here, and the train will come through the tunnel here, and we'll do a trestle bridge here. Oh, and I want pine trees here. And they build this whole world. Well, it's sort of like having a train set within the covers of a book for me. You ask about what surprised me the most in writing the book. I think what surprised me was how much I could. I'm trying to find the right word for it. I really wanted my characters, my lead characters, even though they are going to try to commit a murder, each of them, I really was on their side. I wanted them to succeed. And I thought, this is very strange. Normally in a mystery, you want to find the killer and either stop them from doing it or punish them for doing it. And yet I found that by making the people that they were going to try to kill, making them so reprehensible, so distasteful, such bad influences on the world, such a poisonous presence, that the desire to murder them is nothing more than to cleanse the world. It would make the world. It's part of my 4 rules of McMasters.
Yeah.
You have, and that's my code of ethics for McMasters. I came upon that very early in writing the book, that in order to justify your what we call a thesis, the goal of your studies, which is of course to commit this one impeccably perfect homicide, you have to answer 4 questions about what you're trying to do. And if you can answer those 4 questions the right way, then you are perhaps justified in this mission you've undertaken. And the 4 questions are, is this murder necessary? Is there no other way to deal with this situation? 2, have you given your target every last chance to change their ways and stop being so pernicious? And I say that if they refuse to change, then murdering them is simply having them commit involuntary suicide. And 3, who will mourn their loss? Will someone be hurt if they leave this earth? And 4, will this world be a better place without them in it? And if you can answer those 4 questions honestly to yourself, then it sort of gives you permission to consider these studies at McMasters. And I was surprised at how readily I found myself rooting for them, hoping that they would succeed. I believe in my characters very much. And I was just, I felt very good that I could feel good about what they were doing. They didn't strike me as being villains. They struck me as being heroic. So that surprised me a little bit.
It's interesting to hear that perspective. I mean, I guess as a reader, because everything is sort of laid out from the beginning of the book as like, here's what's happening. And also because of sort of the foreword being that you also pick up the book because you have the intention of a deletion yourself. You're already like placed on the side of the character. You at least technically have something in common with them. So like it's no surprise there. So yeah, it's but it is different than sort of any other murder mystery book because you do root for the killer. Yeah. And all the ways of ending people in the book. Did you do research for it? Because there's this joke that is definitely amongst writers. And I did literature at university, so all my creative writing tasks were sort of littered with this joke that if the police could see what we had to research as like writers, we'd definitely be, taken away very far away. So I was curious how your Google history looked like after starting to create the McMasters world.
Yeah. I think if someone had seen my Google history during the years that I was writing this book, I would definitely be speaking to you from prison right now. Yes, I actually did a tremendous amount of research. Almost everything that you read in the book is real. Mm-hmm. Every method, every poisonous frog that I mentioned, every way of dealing with apricot pits and converting them into a poison. It's frightening. Mother Nature is not pretty. And there's a lot, there's a certain tree in Africa that if you stand underneath its leaves and it rains, it will kill you. The rain will kill you.
Okay.
The rain coming off the leaves is so acidic that it will actually burn holes in you. There are frogs that if you just touch them, that's the end of your life. So I researched all of it, and especially a lot of the pharmacological aspects of it. I have a friend who is a pharmacist, owns a drugstore, and I would call him and ask him about. I would call him and repeatedly and say, "What if I add it to a poison will negate that poison? What is the?" And I one day, the phone rang and my wife answered it, and she talked for a while. And I said, "Who was that?" And she said it was Phil. That's his name, Phil. And I said, "Oh, didn't he want to speak to me?" And she said, "No, he was asking me how I was feeling."
Wow.
He wanted to know if I had any stomach cramps. I mean, he really began to worry about what I was up to. So it's a very astute question, and you hit it right on the head. Yes. I now know things I should not know.
I mean, you're now very prepared in case of any situation, and I bet you now know what to mix with what and what to not mix with with things.
I have become a very cautious eater nowadays. It's surprised me how many things can go wrong in a meal that could be bad for you. It's amazing how much trust we have in the chefs who prepare our food.
This just reminded me of a scene from the book where they have like Cliff is invited to dine with the headmaster, and then it's a working dinner. And I did think the same thing, that I would hate having to like go and eat at university and like always try to figure out if my food was going to kill me or not. Now that you have said that it required a lot of research, and I do know from other interviews that you have done that it took you 10 years to create the world itself. Can you tell me and readers more about like the world building behind McMasters and how you went about creating such an intricate but also very unique setting, because it is very detailed and very visual, almost so that it's so easy to see everything, and whoever will make an adaptation of this series will have a very easy job because it's all there in the writing.
I hope so. Well, I was sort of inspired in the country of Wales in the United Kingdom. On the coastline of Wales, there is a village called Portmeirion, and it was created by an architect named Clough Ellis. And he was not only an architect, but he collected architectural follies, buildings that were a little grandiose or old, out of date, or very pompous, great archways. And what he would do is, when he found that a building was going to be destroyed, some old building, castle, village hall, anything, if it had any kind of aspirations to grandeur on a small scale, he would purchase some aspect of it. And he built himself a Mediterranean fishing village on the coast of Wales that's quite, it's like the Wizard of Oz. It's an unreal world. They used this particular village on a TV series that was popular in the 60s called The Prisoner with Patrick McGowan. And he's trapped in this village, this very quaint and charming village, but he's a prisoner there. I visited that village of Portmeirion, and I always thought that if I created a university of my own, that I would fill it with all the many of the different things I had seen, not only in other universities, but in English villages. And so the first conceit was that the manor house and many of the buildings around the manor house have been lifted, flown brick by brick from the north of England. And this is an old Norman village. So that the mansion itself is a gorgeous kind of Tudor Victorian monstrosity that could have been out of the Wind of the Willows. There is a village, an English Dickensian style village. But then I went to several universities myself. I went to Syracuse University for my first year of studies. I then went to the Manhattan School of Music for the rest of it. But I also wrote a novel. My second novel is set on the campus of the University of Berkeley in California. And one of the beautiful things about universities, and European countries know this better than anyone, is they're pretty much timeless. They will, sometimes there will be a new building created to house a new department or something. But if you go to Oxford, if you go to Cambridge, if you go to Harvard, you are still seeing the buildings as they were 200-300 years ago. You're sitting in a classroom. So that allowed me to say, well, any kind of building that I love can be here, because the founder of McMasters, Guy McMaster, he purposely collected them. See, I should explain. I grew up in a town on the Hudson River called Nyack, New York. And in it, there was an Episcopal church. And it was a beautiful church, but it was a very British church. It looked like it was plucked from the countryside of England. And it turned out that it was. They bought, the people of Nyack, New York, the diocese there, had purchased an English a small English church. And then the bricks were all numbered, and it was all taken apart and shipped to the United States, and they rebuilt the British church in this American town. And it feels British. It's the smell is of England. And I would call him and ask him, about, I would call him repeatedly and say, what if I add it to a poison will negate that poison? What is the, and one day, the phone rang and my wife answered it, and she talked for a while, and I said, "Who was that?" And she said it was Phil. That's his name, Phil. And I said, "Oh, didn't he want to speak to me?" And she said, "No, he was asking me how I was feeling."
Wow.
He wanted to know if I had any stomach cramps. I mean, he really began to worry about what I was up to. So it's a very astute question, and you hit it right on the head. Yes, I now know things I should not know.
I mean, you're now very prepared in case of any situation, and I bet you now know what to mix with what and what to not mix with with things.
I have become a very cautious eater nowadays. It's surprised me how many things can go wrong in a meal that could be bad for you. It's amazing how much trust we have in the chefs who prepare our food.
This just reminded me of a scene from the book where they have like Cliff is invited to dine with the headmaster, and then it's a working dinner. And I did think the same thing, that I would hate having to like go and eat at university and like always try to figure out if my food was going to kill me or not. And now that you have said that it required a lot of research, and I do know from other interviews that you have done that it took you 10 years to create the world itself. Can you tell me and readers more about like the world building behind McMasters, and how you went about creating such an intricate but also very unique setting? Because it is very detailed and very visual, almost so that it's so easy to see everything, and whoever will make an adaptation of this series will have a very easy job, because it's all there in the writing.
I hope so. Well, I was sort of inspired in the country of Wales in the United Kingdom. On the coastline of Wales, there is a village called Port Merion, and it was created by an architect named Clough Ellis. And he was not only an architect, but he collected architectural follies, buildings that were a little grandiose or old, out of date, or very pompous, great archways. And what he would do is, when he found that a building was going to be destroyed, some old building, castle, village hall, anything, if it had any kind of aspirations to grandeur on a small scale, he would purchase some aspect of it. And he built himself a Mediterranean fishing village on the coast of Wales that's quite, it's like the Wizard of Oz. It's an unreal world. They used this particular village on a TV series that was popular in the 60s called The Prisoner, with Patrick McGowan. And he's trapped in this village, this very quaint and charming village, but but he's a prisoner there. I visited that village of Port Marion, and I always thought that if I created a university of my own, that I would fill it with all the many of the different things I had seen, not only in other universities, but in English villages. And so the first conceit was that the manor house and many of the buildings around the manor house have been lifted, flown brick by brick from the north of England. And this is an old Norman village. So that the mansion itself is a gorgeous kind of Tudor Victorian monstrosity that could have been out of the Wind of the Willows. There is a village, an English Dickensian style village. But then I went to several universities myself. I went to Syracuse University for my first year of studies. I then went to the Manhattan School of Music for the rest of it. But I also wrote a novel. My second novel is set on the campus of the University of Berkeley in California. And one of the beautiful things about universities, and European countries know this better than anyone, is they're pretty much timeless. Mm-hmm. Sometimes there will be a new building created to house a new department or something. But if you go to Oxford, if you go to Cambridge, if you go to Harvard, you are still seeing the buildings as they were 200-300 years ago. Mm-hmm. You're sitting in a classroom. So that allowed me to say, well, any kind of building that I love can be here, because the founder of McMasters, Guy McMaster, he purposely collected them. See, I should explain. I grew up in a town on the Hudson River called Nyack, New York. And in it, there was an Episcopal church. And it was a beautiful church, but it was a very British church. It looked like it was plucked from the countryside of England. And it turned out that it was. They bought, the people of Nyack, New York, the diocese there, had purchased a small English church. And then the bricks were all numbered, and it was all taken apart and shipped to the United States, and they rebuilt the British church in this American town. And it feels British. It's the smell is of England, you know? So I thought, well, we can do this with anything. So you have the Mead Mere, which is this gorgeous pond, which is almost the size of a lake, with a little island in the middle of it. You have Castle Guy, so I have my own little ramparts there, which try to look like Bran Castle for me, and all sorts of lovely locations and old buildings that go back hundreds of years, and yet you don't really know where you are when you're at McMasters. The location is secret, as you know. The students don't know where they are. Some of the faculty don't seem to know where they are. Perhaps the dean, the narrator, he may know where they are. I know where they are. And I'm putting little clues in each volume to help help you solve where it might be located.
So this is a personal question now, but okay. If you say that you're putting little clues to know where it is yes. The purpose to then have the reader reveal, like figure it out? Because I always thought it would be like, it's quite cool that it's this place that doesn't have to, you be put anywhere on the map. It's just McMasters. It's there. Definitely in this world because people can get to it, but it just it felt nice because it's an actual escape since you don't really know where it is. So I'm surprised that you would want the reader to figure it out or actually reveal.
Any mystery writer is supposed to play fair with the reader. In other words, you don't want the reader to solve your mystery.
Okay.
But if and when the solution is revealed, you want to say, you see, I gave you that clue and that clue and that clue. Mm-hmm. it's the one thing that wouldn't be fair, the rule in mystery writing, and these rules were set in the 1930s, is you cannot introduce the murderer in the next to the last chapter. You can't suddenly have someone show up and say, I've been doing it. And you say, well, who are you? Oh, I've been hiding the whole book. You have to, so the trick is to give clues, but make sure that they're not so obvious. It's more like if someone guesses and you say, well, I'll tell you privately, you're right, because you got those clues.
Yeah.
But so far, every guess that people have made thus far has not been right. So I'll continue to play fair with the reader and try to give you more clues and hope that you don't guess.
Fair. Okay. So you have already mentioned this, that you have worked in multiple creative fields, and I know, and I do think that your readers know, but that you have had a huge success in each one. But how has your experience of, and again, you have said a bit about this, but your experience of in music and theater, how has it influenced your approach to writing like thriller novels? And do you find the process different? And also, is there one format of writing that you find more difficult than the others?
I've written in just about every format that there is, as you say. And I find that the experience is different in each format.
Mm-hmm.
It would be like saying playing football is like playing baseball. It's not
yeah,
same.
Fair.
And a lot of it is about your relationship with the audience.
Mm-hmm.
And it's why I love writing novels more than perhaps anything. I'll tell you why. When I write a television comedy, I have to find something that possibly 2 million people will find funny at the same moment.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't know who those people are.
True. Yeah.
When I write a play for Broadway or a musical for Broadway, and I want to write something that will either make people laugh or make them cry, I have to find something that will make up to 1,500, 1,000, 1,500 people, strangers who have come together in a theater from completely different backgrounds. Some of them may not be from, they may be from many different countries. English may not be their first language. And you have to, as a playwright, find something that all of these strangers each evening who create this organism called an audience, what you can hope that strangers will find that funny. And usually you do it through character. You create characters that they believe in, identify with, and we all know people who we laugh at their troubles or foibles or dilemmas. When you write a novel, you're writing for an audience of one.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And it's a very different way of writing, because everything you're saying to them is a confidence between the two of you.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I find interesting is if you go to one of my shows in a theater and people are laughing, you'll hear loud laughter usually, hopefully, and the laugh would be like, but if someone's reading my novel, let me do my impression of someone laughing, finding something funny in my novel. Now, you've said that there were funny things that amused you in the book,
yes,
which is a very nice compliment. But let me do my impression for you of someone laughing at something in my book, okay? It goes like this.
Very true. That is.
Or it can go like this. It can be that. Now, if you saw someone reading a book on a train and they laughed the way they might in the audience of a musical comedy, if someone was reading a book on a train and they went, I'm going to make a loud noise now, so
Okay.
I'll back. Okay. If they were on a train reading a book and they laughed like this, you'd want to get off the train.
True.
You'd try to change your seat. So it's such a different way. And what happens to me is that as I write a novel, I begin to get a sense of the person reading the novel.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that sounds funny because I don't know their gender, age, background, but yet there's this person who has been willing to travel this path with me. And everything that I've confessed to them within the pages of the story, they've heard. Everything they've listened to my side of the story. You know, when someone sits down with you and you're sitting over coffee and someone says, let me tell you my side of the story. Well, that's what a novel is. I'm telling you my side of a story. And it becomes such a beautiful bond. Even though I'll probably never meet most of the people that read my books, I am so grateful to them. By the time I get halfway through the book, I think, if they're still with me, God bless them. Isn't that wonderful? You know, you're really being patient. I'm enjoying telling you this story. I guess if you're still on this page with me, I guess you're interested too. So it's such a different experience than writing for a stage or for a film or for TV. And it's such a more subtle way of communicating. I can put in little brushstrokes. I don't have to necessarily get a big round of laughter from you. I just want to get a nod of recognition. Mm-hmm. That's what you read that and you think, oh, that's what they would do. You know, that it's such a nice conversation.
Mm-hmm. So do you then find that it's easier to write a novel because it's to an audience of one?
It's not. No, it's more challenging because there's nowhere to hide.
Oh, okay.
You can't count on an actor's performance. In other words, when I write humor, I can only really be as funny as my reader is. Mm-hmm. If my reader has no sense of humor, they probably won't find it funny because I'm assuming that they can sort of hear it the way I mean it. So because it's so much, as you say, 10 years to write the book, although most of the conception of the book came early, but the actual sitting down every day to write it came in the last few years before it came out. But I think it's more challenging because when you write a song, the end of the song, most of my songs are story songs, they're narratives. But I know when I begin a song, when I sing the first verse of a song, I know I'm only 3 minutes away from the ending of my story. Mm-hmm. That's less pressure. You figure, I can finish this in 2 days. Page one of a novel, and you don't know if it's going to be 200, 300, 400 pages. It's challenging, and I put in a lot of detail in my novels because I find that the more detail there is, the more real it feels. Mm-hmm. In other words, sometimes people will say something like, it was a beautiful day and the sun was shining on the lovely forest. And then they get into the action. I need to tell you about the details of that day and the birds of that day and what the foliage smells like. And I want there to be so much detail that this is true, that this is real, that McMasters is a real place. This I could interestingly, the person who has designed the Broadway sets, stage design for several of my musicals, I asked her to create a map, which is this map of and what was fun was she is an artist and did a gorgeous job creating a detailed, very detailed map of a portion of the McMasters campus, but I was able to tell her where everything was. I was able to diagram it all. And I said, no, it's a little more, no, you've got it too far north. It's a little farther, as if it were really there. And I knew it was there. I was able to say, no, it's nowhere near that. No, it would take you at least 10 minutes to go there. That's much too close. It's off there. And then, anyway, there's the bamboo forest, and then there's the hedge maze in between. So that detail does make writing a novel harder, because it's just on a 28-minute TV comedy, you don't have time for that, and you don't write that. Yeah. So yeah, it's appropriate that the most challenging medium is also the most rewarding medium, and the novel is the most rewarding for me.
That's fair. And since you have mentioned both comedy and mystery, all your or at least all the previous works that I have watched and know of, except the Pina Colada song, as everyone calls it, they have an element of like mystery to them. And I do imagine it's because you like to, keep your audience, be it a huge one or a small one, on their toes. Is this true? And what do you enjoy most about sort of keeping audience expectant of a reveal?
Yeah, we I don't know if you have in Romania, if you have a candy called the Tootsie Pop. Do you have one?
Unfortunately,
okay.
no.
All right. There is a company in the United States, been around forever, that makes a chocolate toffee called a Tootsie Pop, Tootsie Roll, and it's sort of not quite chocolate. It's made more of like gum, not chewing gum, but gum, and it's chewy. You can chew on it a long time. It's chocolate flavored. Well, they also make a thing called a Tootsie Pop, and a Tootsie Pop is a lollipop. Do you know what a lollipop is? Do you have that word?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's a lollipop, a big round lollipop, but at the center of the lollipop is a chocolate filling. And I always say that mysteries are the Tootsie Pop of literature, in that you may get a lollipop and it's a flavor you're not even crazy about. Maybe it's lime or grape or something. But if you keep at it, you will eventually get to that reward of the Tootsie Roll inside. One of the things I found about mysteries when I first started reading them as a boy, and I have many of them on the shelves back here, was I felt like someone put a magnet inside the back page, the back cover of the book. And I knew that as I read it, I was getting closer and closer to my reward. The reward being that, what you called the reveal, that final, that next to the last chapter where the great detective summons all the suspects into the room and explains brilliantly what was really going on, and why everyone didn't see this, and why they were all tricked. And now it's so clear and so obvious. Life is sort of like, to me, at most times, life is like a mystery novel without that final chapter. We go through life and we hope that someone at the end of it will explain why we've been doing all this, and what it's all been about, and who our friends were, and who our true enemy was. And sometimes I think we never get that. Maybe there is no great detective in reality who can gather us all in a room and say, I want to explain to you what you've been up to, and what the truth is here. Mysteries are a very civilized form of literature. People think that Agatha Christie was not a psychopath or a sociopath. She was a very, very comfortable person. She may have murdered lots of people in her mystery novels. Agatha Christie, of course, Murder on the Orient Express. But a mystery story starts with a world that is suddenly thrown into turmoil.
Mm-hmm.
The law has been broken and a human being has died, and we don't even know why. And we don't know who it is that committed this crime against humanity and against society. And until that murder can be solved, anarchy reigns. And anyone, and by the way, in most mysteries, there will be a second victim, possibly third victim. It's not always just about one. Until this person who is deceitful, this person who represents themselves to be like us and good-hearted, someone among us is not what they seem, which is a very standard situation.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly at the end, the great detective makes sense of what we have seen and cannot understand, and order is restored, and the murderer is either brought to justice or in some way dealt with, and we can go back with the society that we work so hard to preserve. So I like mysteries because they give you a reason to stay tuned.
Mm-hmm.
They give you a reason. I've read some. I said about Jack Kerouac in the 50s wrote a very popular novel called On the Road, and when I read it, I thought it was a wonderful book, page by page. But I got the impression that if it didn't matter where I stopped, that it didn't really, it was a way of getting somewhere, but it was never going to culminate in some lesson. It would just kind of drift off. In the 1970s, we made so many movies fell back upon the ending of just having the characters go like, what? And then it would be a freeze frame and maybe a question mark on, and you'd say, well, that's not an ending. That doesn't, you're just saying it. So we're going to stop it here. So I like to have mysteries in my work for a variety of reasons. One is it's a puzzle. I'm trying to get your interest.
Mm-hmm.
And when people say, solve this riddle, if so-and-so went to the dead, you start to get interested already because it's a new, fresh situation. I like mysteries because they give you the impression that there is something to be found out at the end. And by the way, even in something as lighthearted and simple as the Pina Colada song, it actually has a trick ending. It is not a song about pina coladas at all. It is actually it has a plot, and it has a twist ending, and the couple that have answered the personal column, the ad in the newspaper, are going to discover each other. And when they discover each other, they discover something much more striking than just meeting a stranger. And so it is a bit of a mystery as well. So I love that because it just keeps you ratcheted up. And it also, most audiences know that when they're participating in a mystery, whether it's on a stage or in a book or in a song, they are playing a game with the author.
Mm-hmm.
They have sat down to play a game. For example, if you go to see Hamlet and Hamlet is upset and he comes on stage and says, oh, I'm so upset because my father has died and my uncle has married my mother and I can't take it. We say we feel sorry for Hamlet. Mm-hmm. He seems to be showing signs of going mad. If Hamlet were a murder mystery and you knew it was, and Hamlet comes out and says, oh, I'm so sad, my uncle, my friend might turn to me and say, Hamlet's the one who did it. He's pretending to be upset. He actually killed his own father. Mm-hmm. Because that would be a mystery, and we're mm-hmm. trying to play that game. No one second guesses Shakespeare, but people try to guess Agatha Christie. Sure. So it means you're involved. You have an assignment, and that is don't take everything I tell you in a mystery for granted. Mm-hmm. One of my characters may be deceiving you, and in a way that I won't cheat. I'll lay it out there for you. But anyway, it just seems to come naturally to me that life is a mystery, often with no solution. Relationships are a mystery to me constantly. I will look at a couple and they will make no sense. In other words, I can't figure out what their story is.
Uh-huh.
In the old days, you can't talk in these terms anymore. But for example, I knew a couple, and she was very beautiful, and he was much older and not very attractive. And I said, well, he must have, my thought was he must have a lot of money. And then I found out she had the money and he didn't. And at that point, I'm saying, well, then I don't know enough about these two people,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And so these are the kind, life is full of puzzles like that. And I just think that mysteries hold the mirror up to nature. They are a reflection of what we stagger around trying to make sense of all the time.
True, very true. And again, the idea that sort of the author is very present when reading a mystery rings true, mostly because you talking about couples now, again, like really reminds me of the novel and Cliff. I think it is Cliff.
Yeah.
Or was it the narrator who said that, like, when a couple doesn't make sense, it just means you don't know enough about them yet. And
when a couple doesn't make sense, I'm not a voyeur. But when I can't figure out why a couple are together, I always think if I could only just go home with them and see how they talk when they're not in public,
Mm-hmm.
I would know so much more if I could just be that fly on the wall for a little while. Yeah.
But yeah, so and talking about Cliff reminded me that you did say again in another interview that if you love your characters enough, they will say funny things to you. And you have been talking about the importance of like characters. So what tends to come first in any sort of story, be it for like a song or a play or a book, the character or like the plot?
That's a very difficult question to answer. No, it's challenging. In answering the question, I'm answering it for myself as well. I don't have a set answer. Here's my dilemma. Usually, when I write anything, particularly a novel or a comedy thriller, it is based upon a couple of magic tricks that I'm going to try to pull off. In other words, it starts with the plot, but not the details of the plot, but the effect. If you look in a magic book, an old magic book, I'm not talking about sorcery or anything, but a practical magic book for people who perform magic with their hand. Like, usually the description starts with the effect. It says, this is what the people seeing the trick will think you've done. Then it says the preparation, which is, this is what you have to do to start to be able to do that. And then it's the mechanics of how that happens. But the first thing is the effect. What will be the miracle that you will perform? What would be the world they would never expect? How can I give them something that they can't get every day? How can I make something happen on a stage? And it's, how do I turn a mystery inside out? I've had stage thrillers where not only didn't the audience know who done it, but they didn't even know where they were. They didn't know what it turned out that what they thought they were seeing is a complete illusion, and suddenly the whole play turns inside out. So I do start with those moments. Hitchcock used to call them bumps. The moments that jolt you or surprise you. So I will start with that, or in the case of McMasters, with this outrageous premise, this ridiculous idea that there could be a distinguished, elite, luxurious university dedicated to the high purpose of deleting one human being. And how do you make that real? Okay, once I come up with that, who is all this going to happen to? And from there on in, it's all about the characters,
Mhm.
only about the characters. And what happens to me, and this is true, and I marvel every time it happens, is if I can believe in my characters strongly enough, they will end up right. I may have written an outline of the plot. They will not necessarily stick with my outline. They
Mhm.
don't want to go. They say that's not for me. And as you quote, I often, as I'm typing, this is true of Cliff. This is true of Doria, the movie star. This is true a little less so of Gemma because she doesn't make as many jokes. It is definitely true of the dean. As I type, they will say something funny, and I'll go, "Oh, that's good. That's very good." So, and they surprise me. I'm alone in a room and I'm typing and I laugh because they've come up with something funny. And by the way, the joke is the kind of joke they would make, not the kind of joke any other character in the book would make, and not the kind of joke that I might necessarily make. So, and when I was writing a TV series, I wrote 56 episodes of a half-hour situation comedy, but it wasn't a sitcom. We called it a dramedy because it was as much drama as comedy. And we had a very tight time budget. And I sometimes had to sit down on a Thursday night to write an episode that would be filmed on a Monday.
Mm-hmm.
And that type of, if I didn't have a finished script for shooting on Monday, the series would be destroyed because we would waste a whole week's salary to all these people. We had nothing for them to film. So I could not have writer's block. I was not allowed to have writer's block. And yet I was writing it alone. So I couldn't turn to anyone else to bail me out.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned very early on in the series that when I got stuck, the way to solve the problem was not to say, what will I write? What will I invent?
Mm-hmm.
What can I come up with? What can I write to impress somebody? What? No, what I would say is, if you believe in the characters and you believe in the world they're in, then all you have to do is say, well, what would they actually do next?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You don't have to make the decision of what to write. Just think, what would they, given these circumstances that you have currently placed them in, what would be their, and I have certain sections of my first novel, which was made into a movie, called Where the Truth Lies. Certain long sections of it were just me following a character. I had no idea where she was going, but she knew where she was going, and she made the choices that she did based on who she was. And very often, I feel like I steal royalties from my characters because they're doing so much of the writing. And it sounds very fanciful, but I actually mean it. When I'm stuck, all I have to do is say, no, don't think of yourself as a writer.
Mm-hmm.
Think of yourself as a detective who's following somebody. Think of yourself as pursuing them. Just see where they go and write it down. And when I'm going well, I can't keep up with myself. I feel like a stenographer in a courtroom. I feel like that it's all happening so fast that I can't even type it down fast enough. And that's for real. And it all depends on believing in your characters and believing in the world that they're in. And I always know I'm in a good groove as a writer when I can not only see the room in front of me and the character in front of me, but I know just what's behind me too.
Mm-hmm.
That means that I believe in the room I'm in and the house that the room is in and this village that the house is in and the country it's all real to me. If I don't believe in my characters, I'm stuck because then I just have to make things up. Instead, they make the things happen.
I mean, as someone who's very into like character-driven stories, I love that, and I do hope you keep believing in the characters in the McMasters universe, because we do have a reader who sent in a question that they know that you have mentioned you plan to write 25 books in the series for the next 25 years. I mean, that was back then.
Yes.
And the question is that from this plan, what do you hope will be the 25th book? If you know how the series will end already, basically, especially because you mentioned each book will be a how to murder your blank.
Yep. I probably shouldn't give away anything, but let me answer this pretty honestly. But by the way, it's taking me a little longer to write each book, a book a year. So probably maybe only 24 books.
That's fine. We can live with that.
But here's the thing. I'm always amazed at artists who, at the end of their work, want to bring the whole universe they've created down. I've never fully understood that. I saw a TV series, I won't mention it recently, but it was just the most wonderful world. And in the very last episode of the 3rd season, suddenly everybody in that world is being killed. And I was going to be very happy spending more time in that world. I don't believe in Götterdämmerung. I don't believe in the burning of Valhalla. If you go to the trouble of creating a Valhalla, you might as well let it stay around a little while. You know, there are people who like to destroy the thing they created, and they love the. It seems like every time you have a series, a long-running TV series, and they're coming to the last episode, they do something cataclysmic, and yet, and what's bad about that is that in reruns, it kind of takes some of the joy out of this. When you watch an old episode, you think, yeah, but they're all doomed anyway.
Yeah, true.
I know that sounds silly. It sounds very, very simplistic. If there is a last volume in this series, and I know it is going to be the last one I write, I suspect that you won't know it's the last volume. You will just feel like, well, they're still doing what they're doing over there in McMasters. I want you to think, I won't be here forever, but I want people to have the chance to visit McMasters whenever they want, and to know it. And one of the things I always loved about books in series is that I have to believe most readers feel this way. There's that sad last 10 pages of a book that we're enjoying. We know we're getting to the last 5, 6, 7, and we'll look and we'll say, we don't want to look at what happens, but we're looking at page numbers. We say, there's still got 11 more pages in this world. We're dreading that moment when we come to the end and we close the book, and now it's all these people that we've come so attached to. There's no more. And it's one of the reasons as a boy, hating that, I loved any books that were in series, whether it was the Hardy Boys Mysteries, which is an endless series of books, or Perry Mason. Earl Stanley Gardner wrote about 150 of them. You know, it's just the idea that when you finish the book, you think, well, there's still another to read. I haven't read all the Agatha Christie's. There's one Sherlock Holmes story I refuse to read. It's The Problem of Thor Bridge is what its title. Because when I've read that, I've read all the Sherlock Holmes stories there are. I always want to think I've still got one left. So my guess is that if I knew that it was going to be the last volume, I would write it in a very circular way, so that you realize, so that it's clear that this noble institute. I don't think there's going to be a great fire. It's not like Manderley in the novel Rebecca that must be destroyed. I want you to think that I don't think we're going to have a big fire at McMasters and the whole place burns to the ground.
They'll just stay there forever.
Absolutely. As long as anyone will let them, and as long as anyone has the interest to turn the page.
This will be the last question, but you mentioned in your letter for our Romanian readers that you are a fan of George Enescu's music, and you've already talked about Bran and have mentioned other Romanian bits that readers will definitely love. Is there anything else about Romania that maybe has like piqued your interest, just as a little fun ending?
Yeah, well, a lot of people think I said that about Enescu. just to please the audience. But my favorite composition in the world, of all the compositions I've heard classical, from my earliest youth, was the second Romanian Rhapsody. The second Romanian Rhapsody is my first favorite piece of music, and the first Romanian Rhapsody is my second favorite piece of music. I can hum da 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 da. This theme he wrote, the da 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 da. It's noble and heartbreaking and elegant. It's just the most perfect piece of music ever. And the first one is so lively, so exciting. And as a clarinetist, I liked it because it has a good clarinet solo in it. And as a boy, I was a clarinetist. I've mentioned a couple of things. My life will not be complete until I visit Bran Castle. And by the way, it is not Dracula's castle at all.
It's not, no.
People think it is, and it is not, of course. And by the way, Bram Stoker, who wrote Dracula, never visited Romania. And yet, interestingly, the castle depicted on the first edition of Dracula is almost exactly like Bran Castle. Someone must have been working with a photograph or was there in person. Mm-hmm. So I would love to do that. I'd love to be in the Carpathian Mountains. I'd love and I'd love to take a drive one day that would take me from the Carpathian Mountains into the Black Sea, because just the difference and the shore just is amazing. I've mentioned to you the Mary Cemetery. That fascinates me. You, as a writer, I should be grateful, because I don't know if you know this, but I believe that the fountain pen, it was invented by a Romanian.
Yes, that is very true.
So the pen is mighty. The Romanian pen is mightier than the sword.
I know a certain character who would not agree.
Yeah. So just a few things. I'd love to visit, and I'm hoping I will someday soon. If there are enough readers to demand of this wonderful Romanian edition,
okay,
we can get enough. Maybe
we'll make a petition. It's fine.
Please, for my sake.
Okay.